we're going to have a quick roundtable here. First, warm welcome, Jeremy and Manoj.
Thank you.
Let me start with you, Manoj. Could you give a quick limit of what
Can you do volume like this?
Yeah, sure. With Deloitte for the past 18 months, I lead the ecosystems for emerging vendors in AI, specifically around AI and ML. So I manage all of the smallest partners that are coming into the business, and then as well as some of our leading strategic relationships with AWS.
And congrats on being North America Partner of the Year.
Yeah, thank you.
That's huge. And Jeremy, on to you.
So good morning, good afternoon. So I run our cloud relationships from the global strategic partner organizations who, whether it's driving out joint solutions, driving new routes to market from a co-sell and or a marketplace perspective. And I also have some of our technology and software partners where it's not a traditional partner in the Cisco sense. So co-selling is critical to how we go to market and how we deliver to customers.
Yeah. Jeremy, let's stay with you. Cisco is now a software behemoth in its own right? And talking about co-sell, we've seen so much of resell from Cisco. Talk a little bit about what does it mean to do co-sell at Cisco?
Wow. There's a few different versions of co-sell that we look at. So ultimately, as Cisco shifted from your box seller to a software company, we started to shift our focus from delivering boxes and things to customers to becoming more of a platform and inviting other partners in to work with us to co-innovate and to create value. So when we look at co-sell from that perspective, we look at it as building relevance with our customers in areas that we don't necessarily have skill sets, but our partners, our ecosystem partners, adding on top of our platform do. And then we're also looking and we're expanding into the hyperscaler motion. As you look at Cisco, we're a networking company. You don't necessarily look at us as a cloud company. So again, another opportunity for us to drive relevance, but really to bring two sales teams together to help create a value for a customer as they're migrating or moving towards the clouds, as most of our customers are. And so we're really pushing forward with that motion where we show up together. And by showing up together, we're actually showing that we can help them on that migration. So we call it network modernization or secure modernization. It depends on what you look at it. But that's how we're really driving co-sell today is taking an approach of how do we develop our own programs and what do we do around it to bring ecosystem partners into us as a platform, and then participating in our partners' programs to make sure we're getting the full extent of value.
So participating with AWS, for example, but also driving co-sell motions with your own ISVs and or your own GSIs, for example.
Yeah.
Awesome. Manoj, from Deloitte's perspective, how does co-sell look from a GSI point of view?
Yeah, so I can answer it in two different angles. So one angle is, of course, it's a multi-billion-dollar business that we have with a lot of our traditional partners, right? So when you think about all the ERP vendors, all the application vendors, we've had long-standing relationships because there were services offerings that were built on top of it. In the past 10 years, obviously, we have accelerated that with hyperscalers, including AWS and some of our other partners. And so now we're into the next wave of where some of these AI partners are coming in, specifically as clients transform from data and analytics and cloud into the world of AI and machine learning. That is where we are kind of, trailblazing, if you will, in terms of bringing these ecosystems together, pretty much at the same scale of what we would be doing with a large partner. So that's where we're looking at two ends of the spectrum and really trying to accelerate that motion.
Yeah, and Manoj, could you take an example of a partnership or an example of a customer scenario where this co-selling kind of is central to the story of kind of winning together?
Yeah, absolutely. And we just went into production with one of the emerging partners. If you've heard of a company called Dataiku, who we set an alliance relationship literally about 6 months ago. And in fact, today is the 1-year anniversary of when we signed an MOU. So it's great in the sense of how a emerging partner, kind of were brought into this equation. And literally, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, we went into production in terms of the co-sell and the co-marketing motion. And the reason why that's important is because when you think of startups, right, obviously they're driven by the relationships that they build. And when it comes to a GSI partner, it's all about the pipeline and the revenue that we are driving. And so having visibility at the leadership level in terms of what are the activities that we're driving, how do we build the muscle, and how do we scale it across the organization, it's important for us to have a common tool set, right? Whether it's from a CRM capability, whether it's from a pipeline visibility perspective. And it's interesting, one of the things that you showed earlier, which is everything is managed by spreadsheets and PowerPoint and email. And Jeremy and I were exchanging notes. It's like, yeah, that's exactly how it works. So this gives us an immediate avenue for us to measure and predict kind of where the market is going, as well as an ROI on the investments that we're making, which may not be apparent because it's an emerging partner, right? Which is different than established partners.
That's awesome. So the speed at which you're now partnering, the kinds of partners that you're partnering with, and the impact that you're bringing, the windows are kind of shrinking in with this motion. That's awesome. Jeremy, what would be a good example of a customer motion that either you did with AWS or with your ISV ecosystem?
You know, on the AWS side of the house, we are, I call us nascent, right? So maybe a couple years, a year and a half of really driving co-sell together. So I'll give a perspective. It's a public number, so I won't get in trouble for this. We drove about 400% growth in co-sell last year with this. Now, law of small numbers, it's easy to do that, but it wasn't that small of a number for us. It still had an impact. So from an AWS lens, it's really allowed us to position ourselves alongside a lot of their commercial engines. So we're all aware of the EDP and how customers are leveraging those as they sign them. And we look at that from the standpoint of an opportunity to accelerate a deal or create a larger deal from the standpoint of opening up the budget, getting to a CFO versus a technology decision maker inside the company. And so those types of deals have actually closed. It takes us a little time. We're a little anemic at some of the processes behind things, but what happened is we were able to bring 3 different components of our business. So we have acquisitions that kind of sit on their own, sell it to one customer in a very short window to drive to the marketplace. So we were able to get it into the AWS marketplace with it. And you know, for us too, we also have existing customers or existing partners that we worked with at NetApp or Pure, where we have joint solutions in market that we've never been able to legitimize the number. We've never been able to tie what actually ended up into the customer from our revenue perspective or theirs. So we've been looking for a platform and the technology to wrap around that, just like you mentioned, to deliver on a way to actually truly recognize the value of a relationship so that we aren't walking in with someone saying, I don't believe this. There's no way this number is this big. So it's really an important aspect for us.
So it's really industrialized and quantified the impact. So talking about quantification, I think it's very important for chief partner officers to stand behind the numbers, just as a salesperson would, right? A chief revenue officer would. So with that regard, what are the metrics you guys are measuring? Maybe Manoj, you can start with.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, going back to this relationship, and I can even extend that to the relationship that we have with AWS, which is, let me start with AWS. Clearly we have had a long-standing relationship over the past decade, multi-billion-dollar business that we have built in, but a lot of that has been driven based on cloud and digital transformation. Here comes AI/ML, which is an emerging area for both of us, and we're now trying to gravitate towards what is the market opportunity, how do we capitalize on it? And that's where the solution and the co-sell and even the co-marketing, I would even extend, the pilot that we're doing with AWS is both co-sell and co-marketing, where we have launched a few initiatives, to your point about how do we measure what is the true driver, true ROI for the investments that we're making. So things like joint opportunities, joint leads that have come in, how long does it take for a campaign to roll into market, and how many leads in terms of social media and impressions and things like that. All of those which were captured in some form or fashion in different tool sets is now kind of on a single platform where we'll continue to use your flywheel to say, okay, I think we started on the co-sell part of the flywheel, we're going into co-market, and then coming the other way around because there is co-innovation and co-investment happening, it's just not captured, right? So it gives us that ability to do that.
Jeremy, what metrics are you measuring?
It's expanded our KPI portfolio. So if you think generally we want to talk about revenue, we want want to talk about bookings, we want to show a value proposition. But we've started to actually go from those quantitative measures that show value to qualitative measures that show value. So how fast is the deal closing? How quickly am I getting to market? So time to revenue is becoming even more important for us as competitors get out faster, if we know. So we have the standard that everybody has from the revenue perspective, but then we're also looking at things like the time to revenue. We're looking at the concepts around software from the standpoint of, do we see churn in this? Do we see more stickiness? Is there more longevity across these relationships with the customer as we bring two things together that create that sticky factor for a customer to stay on with us? So we've really expanded that portfolio. I could give you guys probably 2 pages of list of what we're actually trying to track. But what's critical for us is that we used to track about 5 or 6 on Excel. And that's about as difficult as you can get and not very reliable. So as we expand in the portfolio, it's giving us a place to put those and to start actually showing and sharing. So one other thing, it's not just our KPIs anymore. Now we're looking at our partners' KPIs as well. So what is important to our ecosystem partner as we sell together? So that gives us a perspective of accountability within inside our ecosystem partnerships that helps us drive their relationship with the customer as well.
Yeah, if I may add one other thing, I think in addition to the KPIs, it's also the real-time visibility of what's happening in the relationship, right? Because we have, for most of these partners that we have ongoing meetings on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. And the question is, are we progressing towards the goals and how far are we down the path? Having that alignment and integration into our respective CRMs gives us the truth behind, okay, this is tied into the business process versus just another tool that you bring up and validate.
Now, I have seen some new respect for the metrics that the partner also cares about in your plans. So that's really exciting to see. It's mutual. It's not a channel relationship. It's more of a co-equal relationship where their metrics are as important as yours. I'll ask one last question, but I'll open it up to the audience to ask questions as well. So think of your question as I asked the last one here. It must be hard in the sense that, co-sell is new. It's a new muscle being built with AWS, with other ISVs, with GSIs. You have had your kind of new muscle building. So what people, process, tools, changes that you had to make co-sell stick in your company?
So I can speak for, because we went through this for the last 6 months. I think one of the biggest challenges is the inertia of change. Change of, hey, I've been doing this very well with spreadsheets, why go into a new tool? I think the second aspect of it is internalizing the tool itself and integrating into the business process and the organization, right? So we were fortunate enough to, bring together a couple of team members. You heard one of my colleagues speak earlier, but bringing a couple of team members who are managing this whole process because it's a pilot for us, right? Cisco is a little ahead of it. The good news is that, when we look at our ecosystem, almost half of them are already on this platform. So that gives us additional credibility and, and moving forward into the pilot. So that's the number 2 thing. I think the third aspect of it is the amount of KPIs that we want to agree on, right? Which is, it's not just our KPIs, but it's our partners' KPIs, and getting to that alignment so that we have a single pane of glass to view it. I think that's the key factor in driving.
Jeremy, how did you manage this change?
Yeah, it's simple. It's hard. It's not easy. It's interesting in your video, the lady from CG, I think it was, she mentioned about sales desk.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in understanding how many of you actually have a sales desk that you leverage to do co-selling or selling? Yeah, some. Okay. So we did. We have multiple sales desks to the point where part of that co-invest became us investing in a sales desk resource for each partner. So we really had the people process. The technology was Excel. And the technology of Excel was a spreadsheet by each partner or potentially by each solution. So it became very complicated. So we built the processes to go deliver these things through our sales force and our partners. So Cisco's about 90% revenue through a channel partner. So we can't just care about what a sales team thinks. We actually have to care about what the partner thinks, because inevitably they're our first customer. And so as we look at that, you can't expand a model that's that manual to, call it 2,000 channel partners. Not the 60 that sell, but 2,000 channel partners, how difficult that would be. So what we've really been trying to do is we call it, we say legitimize. I try to stop that and call it industrialize. But we're trying to industrialize it by creating the technology that supports that sales process and the people. And the sales desk doesn't necessarily have to go away, but the sales desk then becomes a more value-added resource into the motion. So they're no longer tracking, they're no longer having to click something into Excel. They're able to actually have an initial conversation. They're able to actually establish a need for a seller or a partner to get involved in the transaction. So that's a lot of lift, and it's very difficult for us in the sense that we've got a very, very ingrained channel motion, and as we expand to ecosystem partners, we have to find a way. Mark and I were talking earlier about this. We have to find a way to lower the cost to serve, right? So if I look at the traditional, you get these 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the revenue comes from, or 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the partner. I need to be able to provide resources towards those partnerships while at the same time expanding the portfolio of ecosystem partners to actually deliver value into the customer. And it could be unique circumstances for that. So we're taking an approach to take that technology to actually, in some cases, enhance the process and the people, in other cases, to actually take over the process and the people for us. So it's tough. It's not easy because we're having to really change the mentality of our sellers and our partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great community, and we promise to hold more such sessions. So learning from Jeremy yourself, Manoj yourself, and this community is really powerful. So look out for our ecosystem business summits, our events where we bring the community back together for such knowledge sharing. So, but on to your questions, please. Go ahead, please, Phil.
Very interesting discussion. Appreciate you guys having me. I work at Snowflake, and I'm curious. So what we find is that there's a full spectrum of this goes on. Everything from, just, hey, they didn't get in our way, right? There's not a ton about it, but they're not actively selling against us. To, they brought us in and are having sub-industry level conversations about use cases that we'll never have expertise in, that the customer's just eating up, and but for that involvement, we'd never get the kind of deal that we get. Have you found any common vocabulary or ability to discuss where on the spectrum these deals fall, so that, to your point from earlier, the CFO doesn't look down and call the number, and yes.
Yeah. I can take one shot at it and please add. So some of our partners, they actually measure this. So when you track a GSI partner, for example, there will be a drop-down which says, did the partner help with a shared demo? Access to a new buying center, access to a use case that you did not have access. So you can actually qualify it and actually measure it, and you can score the point around it. So some of our partners actually assign a percentage. So instead of all 100% to one partner, they actually assign an influence percentage based on it as well. So there are a lot of attempts like this to first quantify and measure across all deals what was the exact influence created. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing we've recently introduced is the whole sourced by, influenced by, right? And how much of percentage of the deals are sourced by one partner versus another, and in which areas are we also influencing? Because those are things that are not visible, let's say, in a traditional CRM. And I think the other aspect of it is also the fact that when you think about all of these multiple opportunities, there are different stages of adoption at the maturity level of the client and the discussions, right? So there is a spectrum where we go into leads accepted and engaged, right? So the moment we hit into engage, we know that this is a real qualified opportunity that we can now start connecting. And what we are measuring at that point is, okay, at any given point in time, how many leads are in the system as an accepted, how many are engaged. The percentage delta tells us the deal velocity of how it's moving from one stage to the next. So those are some indicators that we can, again, it's a work in progress, but those are some differentiators that we can leverage.
So Monty with Talent, we're still kicking the tires and exploring the options with WorkSpan. We just went through the lightning upgrade with Salesforce, so of course we're in turmoil right now. It's freaking out. Just wondering, from an implementation standpoint, both technically and organizational change management, what's the heavy lifting look like there? How much pushback do you get from the organization, and how long before you really started seeing people start to use it to
I'll take the tool side of things and change management if you guys can take it. So for Salesforce Lightning piece, WorkSpan has a managed application, which is the 1.9 version just got released. What we've seen is companies take 3 to 6 weeks to actually deploy that from an IT perspective. Most of the work is actually packaged. It actually is 3 days worth of work. But because you're collaborating, discussing, scheduling meetings, these 3 meetings could happen over a 6-week period or 4-week period. But the actual real effort is around 72 hours of work to actually map the data, figure out when you say this stage, what does that mean with that stage? What is the automation you need and all that? So that's the net effect. And most of the work is done by the WorkSpan folks. I would say about most other work that your admin would do is mapping and providing the API keys and testing it actually. So not much. From a change management point of view, I'll let these people just.
So we don't have Salesforce integrated. So we're taking this step by step and leveraging WorkSpan in a way to actually deliver on a lot of the other assets that they provide. Info security is a major aspect for us as to how we do this. So it's a little difficult from that perspective. But what I would say, I'm sure you can talk a little bit more about how the change management was on the technical and system side. But there's a change management you have to do with your Salesforce too. Right? So for us, one of the things that we have issues with is whenever we add a partner into our Salesforce instance for a customer, the seller thinks they're not going to get credit anymore. Right? And all of a sudden, now we have this resistance to put the numbers in, garbage out. So if you don't have good data in your Salesforce system, you're not going to have good data when it comes out. So there's really got to be a push from the standpoint of how you change the mentality of your sellers to enter that information so that they have it. And it goes back to the first gentleman's question about like how do you determine what you should put there? Like what is that? You need to have that piece and you need to educate them. Otherwise, all the change you do technically really doesn't drive the whole value you're looking for.
Yeah, and in our case, I think the integration into the CRM system, so it's basically a step process. And again, to your point, we're only 6 months in. So the reason why we decided to hold off on the integration right now is because we ourselves are upgrading our CRM instance globally. And that just, I think, is going live on December 11th. So once that happens, we couldn't get into the cycle of change management, of bringing WorkSpan into that integration. As soon as that goes live, we're now going to be actively bringing WorkSpan into the engagement. So it's just a matter of where the organization is in terms of its evolution, right, or maturity of CRM adoption or transformation, and then where WorkSpan can fit in. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, Chris Carlson for Sawyer, so we have the same info set challenge. So how can you guys just expand a little bit on the process of probably using WorkSpan as a integrated?
So we created the data, or not created, you all created it, so thank you for that. We actually leveraged their data connector with the ACE tool, for example. So what that allows us to do is bring all of that information in to I call it a sandbox, where I can start to create sales campaigns that I'm sharing with AWS sales teams or AWS sales leaders. So we're leveraging all the capabilities that WorkSpan brings as a platform. We're just unable to connect the dots on making sure it's connected all the way through our Salesforce. But it doesn't stop us from being able to show reporting. So especially with the ACE tool, if you guys are leveraging the ACE tool, that reporting, that information there is very valuable to us, because when I talk about co-sell, I say this is what an AWS seller got paid on. not a revenue side of us. So it creates a value to the data I'm sharing. So we're leveraging both the platform from the selling perspective and some of the key things they have there, as well as the reporting tools and the analytics tools that are on top of it as well.
Yeah, Chris, there are 3 modes of WorkSpan. One is where you can manually enter the deal. Second is where you can bring it in a bulk in a spreadsheet. So you integrate to a report from Salesforce as opposed to directly to an API in Salesforce. And then the third one is the API integration or a native application that you have inside Salesforce. So we call this crawl, walk, and run. Both these gentlemen have started with the walk, where they have from their CRM a bulk spreadsheet or an upload of a report which is updated, refreshed pretty frequently. So that way they're able to send information back to ACE or AWS or any of their partners, but they're also able to receive information back. So you can start with a crawl, walk, run approach.
Yeah, and I think the way even the approach that we took is actually, we looked at 2 vendors, right? 2 partners, in this case, Dataiku and AWS. On one hand, it's an emerging partner. On the other hand, it's a very established partner. And so we are now able to test the scale of how large and the volume of opportunities that we can bring into this system, because as my colleague pointed out earlier, we have hundreds of alliances, right? 50% of those are already on WorkSpan. We're trying to use this pilot to now expand it to the broader audience. And that's where the true integration will come into play.
Yeah.
I think we're getting
an indication that we've gone over. Now, this has been an exciting discussion. Thanks for sharing your best practices and thoughts candidly with the whole community here. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj.